Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. It's Wednesday, July 29th, 2020. Last Friday in my Fast Friday episode, I covered the latest annual report from the unconstitutional ATF, and it's not good news, not even close. In fact, it was another record-breaking year for the most federal gun control enforcement in history. And I think these numbers give us a great example of how large segments of the people of this country have absolutely no principles or no consistency on their principles. On the one side, you'd expect a whole group of people to be cheering this on, like, oh, I can't stand that guy, but at least he's on my side on this issue. And the other side that is, I think, very inconsistent are those who should be tarring and feathering, protesting, demanding an end to this, or not support, whatever it may be. And instead, a lot of them merely make excuses, and they're really bad. We get tons of them here when we put out this information every year, and I'm going to cover three of the worst ones that I've been getting in the last few days. But first of all, before getting to that, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. We're on a bunch of, well, first of all, our show homepage is 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. It's all spelled out. On that page, you're going to find tons of stuff. All the episodes we've ever done, all the archives, you can scroll through them. I'm working on getting some better navigation so you can pick shows by category because there's been over 2 years of shows. But you can also find all the platforms we're on. We're live streamed through Facebook, YouTube, DLive, Twitter, Periscope, and Twitch. We also have archive video versions at Brighteon.com, BitChute.com, BitTube.tv, and I'm forgetting one. But we have audio-only podcast editions over at iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and elsewhere. And the reason I like to mention all of these platforms is because you never know when someone's going to say the stuff that you're saying on our platform is no longer allowed. So we like to make sure that you're aware of it. You hear it over and over and over where you can go and follow us. And in fact, I would encourage using some other platforms rather than the mainstream ones anyways. But if you don't want to, we want to be where you want us to be. But also on that show homepage, on each individual episode, I include links to stuff so you can read and learn more. That's far more important than just hearing me give an overview on stuff. You can find our social media channels, our email newsletter that you can subscribe to, and of course, ways to support us like our membership program, which starts out at a mere $2 a month, but we make it go a long, long way here at the TAC. Again, that's 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. I want to say a quick hello to everyone out in the live chat. I'm just going to scroll through here. Greg McCauley, I appreciate your email this morning. Erwin, Jane, Ernest, Bob Landry, Bob Brewer, good to see you guys. Too Tall, Tyler B., Justin Morrison, Tim Martin, Lauren Smith, Heather Rossi, Funky Euphemism, Justin Bayola, always good to see you, man. And everyone else. I know I'm missing a few people, but I'm just trying to blast through that so we can get right to the info. I'm going to try. I've done a few really long episodes over the last week or so, and hey to MRGF78. Please continue leaving comments, whether it's live or in the archive. I read through all of them later on in the day, and I don't get a chance to reply to all of them, but I do actually take in all the feedback, and I get tons of ideas for future episodes as well. So let's first go back to that episode I'm talking about. I know a lot of you here have already seen or heard this. Worst in history, smashing federal gun control records from last Friday. I will link to this in the show notes at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. Here are the three big takeaways that I think, at least if I were just listening to it rather than talking, this is what I would take away from that episode. First of all, there are no federal gun control measures that are authorized by the Constitution. None. Zero. That is all that's authorized. Period. End of story. Shall not be infringed, as my friend and co-worker here at TAC, Mike Meharry, puts it, does not have an asterisk. The second thing I would say is the current administration for more than 2 years. Actually, it's like 2.5. The first year was an overlap between the two administrations, the previous and the current. For 2 years in a row on their own, they've done the most federal gun control in history. And it's way more than the terrible gun-grabbing previous administration. Worst in history. I cannot emphasize that enough. And at the end of the day, and this is not intended to make friends, it's just intended to be hard truth. And sometimes truth is very difficult. But people who believe that this guy is the Second Amendment president are just as ignorant as the people who thought the last guy was the peace president. So with that, let's get to these 3 excuses that I think are very common in some form, or at least way wrong, but something that we hear. And one of the first ones that I get kind of goes like this. There's variations on this, but I want to focus on this particular one. I would look, and someone specifically said this to us, I would look differently at prosecuting gun smugglers than I would at a bump stock or red flag law prosecution or prosecuting them for those violations. Now, setting aside the fact that the bump stock ban, for example, was instituted by the same guy and the same administration doing the most enforcement in history, let's talk about smuggling. And let's set aside the fact that some of the worst smuggling acts as far as guns actually come from the ATF. Let's think about their Fast and Furious program, at least the ones that we know. They have their gun running program. And setting aside the fact that smuggling is a crime that only results from unconstitutional, illegal, and or immoral prohibition, bad government laws restricting trade in the first place, let's talk about the people in the years leading up to the revolution. They were heroes, of course. Many colonials. This comes from Smuggling Powerhouse at bostonteaparty.org. Many colonials were smugglers, but John Hancock just happened to have a flair for it. And as a quick aside, I happen to be a big fan of Hancock and Samuel Adams. These are some of my favorites, if we're talking about favorites as far as founders go. Hancock actually was probably, if Washington wasn't going to be the first president, Hancock was probably the backup guy. He was that popular, that well respected from all around the country. Now, he just happened to have a huge flair for smuggling. And it was smuggling because of the restrictions of the empire made things very difficult for people to do business. In June 1768, this is from Our American Revolution, those policies touched Hancock directly when his ship, the Liberty, was confiscated by the Board of Customs Commissioners, which was created by the Townshend Acts, the hated Townshend Acts of 1767, which, as you probably know, if you listen to or watch this show regularly, you know that this is where John Dickinson put out that phrase, Concordia res parve crescunt, small things grow great by concord. There was significant resistance to it. His Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania really popularized the theory behind the resistance to that, or opposition to it as well. Anyway, so that was created by the hated Townshend Act. So no one liked that. For suspicion of smuggling Madeira wine, and I apologize if I got that wine name wrong. I don't know much about wine or alcohol, but, well, so be it. So he was under suspicion of smuggling wine. And I think everybody knew that he was smuggling not just wine, but glass, lead, paper, molasses, tea, all kinds of stuff. He was well known for being that guy. He was already born rich, but I think he made a lot of money doing this, and he also helped resist these unconstitutional or immoral restrictions on trade. The evidence, Our American Revolution puts, that the evidence suggests, and I'm doing this a little softly, that the evidence suggests that the smuggling charges were probably true, made no difference to Boston patriots who rallied to Hancock's defense. Check this out. He's going to get convicted for smuggling, or he's getting charged. His ship was seized. The Liberty was the name of the ship, was seized. And people didn't just kind of say, well, he's breaking the law, I'm not going to defend him. What did they do? Thousands of them, several thousand, ended up attacking the homes of the custom commissioners. They beat up a customs inspector and burned a boat belonging to one of the custom collectors on the Boston Common, right in front of Hancock's house. That's how they treated the enforcers of the law in response to people breaking it. Well, at least in that particular situation. Probably not all the time, certainly. Now, he still went to court for this, and there was a trial. They tried to convict him. But a young-ish John Adams actually came to his defense and got him off the hook. You've often heard me say probably that John Adams was really one of the best, one of the really good guys in the early years. And I think he's a great example of how power corrupts, because once he became president and gained some power, he was no longer all that great. And Mercy Otis Warren actually complained about this. The short version: John Hancock and many other patriots were actually cheered and protected for smuggling wine. They were physically protected for this. Yet today, some supposed gun rights supporters are telling me that they're okay with people going to prison for bringing more guns in or out of the country. The federal government should have no say. In fact, we want people to be, if we're talking about wanting people to have arms, and a lot of the protected class are illegal, then smuggling seems, I think that's how Hancock would have taken it. If you're not allowed to do this, find a way. So that is not a positive thing at all to take that approach. The second one that I get pretty often, or that we've been hearing a lot of lately, is, well, what is he enforcing? They'll literally just say, well, what is he enforcing? Suggesting that some federal gun control enforcement is okay. Certain things are okay. And a very common one is, like, if he's going after illegal gun owners, that's fine by me. Now, mind you, and I tweeted about this a few days ago, basically this notion, this really bad marketing strategy of saying law-abiding gun owners, just over and over and over. This is for law-abiding gun owners. I'm a law-abiding gun owner. Well, if you're going to obey the law every time they pass a new one, you give them no reason to stop passing more and more restrictions. What's going to happen? They're going to restrict a new gun, and then you're going to be a law-abiding owner and not have that, and another thing, and another thing, and another thing, and eventually there's going to be nothing left. Sooner or later, being law-abiding, when you live under the largest government in the history of the world, is not necessarily a positive thing. There is a somewhat popular book out there called, I believe, 3 Crimes a Day. I forget the author of it. It explains how basically most people are actually guilty of committing 3 crimes. They're not taken to court, but we can't keep track of tens of thousands of laws and regulations. There's no way. And it shows that there's an enforcement problem as well. They can't. Well, a problem for them and a positive for liberty. So a lot of people take the position that it's okay. Well, I just want to know what he's enforcing. As long as it doesn't affect what I own, then it doesn't matter. I don't care about those other people at all. And some people will even tell us, and I saw this recently, basically, isn't the whole argument against new gun control that you have to really aggressively enforce the current laws on the books? And back when I was talking about the problems with a lot of the so-called Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions passing in Virginia last fall, I did 5 episodes, I think, on that in December to January from 2019 to early 2020. And one of the examples that I gave over and over was that a lot of these sheriffs who were supposedly heroes of the Second Amendment were coming out and saying things like, we just need to enforce the laws on the books. Well, this is not heroic. Enforcing the gun control is not good. We want less enforcement all around, because gun control is a violation of your natural right to keep and bear arms. Well, setting aside this idea that these people are horrible, let's look at what's being enforced. Let's look at it. And here's from a blog published, I guess, yesterday by a longtime friend of the TAC, TJ Roberts in Kentucky. And he puts it this way: from the agency itself, this is from the ATF itself, they prosecuted people for the following most frequent violations. And I like that he puts violations in scare quotes, because it'll make more sense when you hear these. I'm going to go through the top 10 according to the ATF. 1. Failure to obtain a completed Form 4473. 2. Failure to maintain an accurate, completely, timely acquisition and disposition record. 3. Failure to complete forms as indicated in instructions. 4. Failure to record NICS contact information on Form 4473. 5. Failure by transfer to signed and or date Form 4473. 6. Failure to verify or record purchaser's identification document on Form 4473. You guys getting a pattern here? You're recognizing what's going on? 7. Failure to report multiple sales or other dispositions of pistols and revolvers. 8. Failure to properly record firearms information on Form 4473. 9, failure to complete a NICS POC background check. And 10, failure to maintain an accurate, completely, timely manufacture or acquisition record. On Monday's episode, I talked about how during the Whiskey Rebellion, one of the big problems that the people in the back country had was that Hamilton and Washington's whiskey tax also created a burdensome amount of paperwork that no one could reasonably deal with, especially the fact that a lot of people were illiterate who were trying to use whiskey as a medium of exchange. Using paperwork and restrictions like this has always been a tool of tyrants in order to throw people in prison and to enforce their prohibitions. It is really bad. So the top 10, most of them are Form 4473, which shouldn't exist, and the ATF itself shouldn't exist. TJ put it this way: what all of these so-called violations have in common is that there is absolutely no victim. This is a paperwork error that the administration is throwing people in jail for. The ATF has put, and this is back to TJ, has put thousands of people behind bars due to paperwork errors. Many of those errors, mind you, are so simple that a person could have made it on accident. He goes on, the most common violations are in regard to ATF F, or Form 4473, a form you fill out when you buy a gun. This form asks you if you're a felon and if you're mentally fit and all the other things the government wants to know before it allows you to own a gun. In other words, the form itself is a restriction. It's an infringement on the right to keep and bear arms because it assumes that the government will look at that form, the federal government will make a decision of whether or not you are allowed to exercise your natural rights. So many of these, this is incredibly, incredibly bad. And never forget, let's say these were all different things and you actually approved of all the enforcement. Never, ever forget the power that you support government using today to go after people you don't like will eventually be used by someone you don't like in the future to go after you. And then the number one is just, to me, it's just insane. I don't know, but over and over and over, I've been hearing from people basically, who the hell do I vote for? Who are you suggesting? That's very specific. Who do you suggest I vote for then? I mean, let's be clear. Pointing out facts that there is more gun control on the federal level, more gun control enforcement now than any time in history. This is not a recommendation of who you should vote for or not vote for. It is information. It's correct. And it's very, very important for you to be aware of. Now, if you happen to be confronted by the fact that you are interested in supporting the worst federal gun grabber in history, that is on you. That's not me. I did not create that choice for you. That's your own strategy. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about the biggest government in the history of the world, doing the most federal gun control ever, if your only thought is, who do I vote for? If that's your only strategy, your only concern is who am I going to pick, gun grabber A versus gun grabber B, then you're seriously part of the problem. Let's go to Thomas Jefferson. And here in his fair copy, sometime before October 4th or so of 1798, his draft for the Kentucky Resolutions in response to the hated Alien and Sedition Acts, here's how Thomas Jefferson put it. In cases of an abuse of the delegated powers, the members of the general government being chosen by the people, a change by the people would be the constitutional remedy. So Jefferson is saying, if they're just using the delegated powers in ways that are just bad, the ways that you don't like they do have the power to declare war, for example. Let's say they declare war on a bunch of people that you don't want them to, you think is really just a bad choice. Well, the proper constitutional remedy, according to Thomas Jefferson, is to vote the bums out. But, and he goes on, where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. So when the government is just making bad policy decisions while exercising powers delegated to it, then vote them out. But when they exercise powers never delegated to them in the first place, voting the bums out isn't going to change anything. It isn't the right approach. And in fact, Jefferson told us that nullification is the rightful remedy. So we recommend following Jefferson's advice. And actually, he's not the only one. And in our State of the Nullification Movement report at 10thamendmentcenter.com/report, that will be linked in the show notes of this episode as well, we go over in about 110 pages. The first half, we talk about the strategy, how it's been applied in the past, the principles, the legal theory behind this idea of nullification, how to implement it. And then in the second half of that report, which we do just about every year, we list out various ways, maybe 8 or 9 different ways in main areas where it's being put into practice right now. We give an update about how it's playing out. One of those sections is on federal gun control, on the right to keep and bear arms. So I encourage you to read that and check that out, because this whole idea that, oh, okay, well, if this guy that I love is terrible on gun control, well, then who do I vote for? You're not even in the right ballpark in your strategic thinking, in your thought about how to deal with this. And I guess the first two that I mentioned kind of overlap. It's basically, well, which laws are they enforcing? So I guess I should do another one just in case, one bonus one. And I don't really have anything to say about it other than this has got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And this is possibly the most common, probably second most common, in compared to which laws are he enforcing, as if some gun control measures from the federal government are okay as long as they go after people you don't like. But that's absurd. The Constitution delegates to the federal government. In the Constitution, there's no power over guns at all, period. But the bonus one will say, I guess, a lot of people would just say it's not true. Fake news. You're lying. Your sham of a website is making stuff up, trying to attack my president. The amount of people we've seen on social media sending an email, leaving voicemail messages, just angry. But I think the fact is that a lot of people are really confronted by this, because a lot of people who claim to support the right to keep and bear arms are actually not really good guardians of that right to keep and bear arms, because they are paying attention to the political drama of the day and always going after one team in support of the other, or vice versa, rather than really paying attention to the facts on the ground. And that's why I think, and why I use the word ignorant. They're just being totally ignorant about who is good and who is bad on the right to keep and bear arms. And when it comes to politicians, they are all bad, and some other human beings who still have blood flowing in their veins are pretty good. But, and that's why I say the people who thought Obama was the peace president, they're also incredibly ignorant, because that dude was bombing country after country after country, expanding warfare to more countries than the previous guy. So there's a lot of ignorance from left to right, and a lot of burying this head in the sand. But there's also a problem of loyalty. People have a loyalty to a person, a political party, a political team, rather than a loyalty to the Constitution and liberty and doing the right thing. And that reminds me, and I thought of it just before starting the live broadcast, it reminds me of a great quote from Samuel Adams. He was literally just 26 years old. I think it was 1748 when he wrote this article, Loyalty and Sedition. It was published in The Advertiser. Let me pull up a little bit on the screen here so you can read along. And here's how he put it. He says, "It is a very great mistake to imagine that the object of loyalty is the authority and interest of one individual man, however dignified by the applause or enriched by the success of popular actions." Samuel Adams, at 26 years old, was way smarter than almost everyone that I associate with or have ever met today. Way smarter than me. And he recognized this at that age. I definitely wouldn't have at 26 years old. But it's a mistake, he said. It is a very great mistake to think that loyalty should go to one person. And I would say that loyalty, we could expand that to one political team or one political party. And further, he said, true loyalty is founded in the love and possession of liberty. He also said near the end of that article, Loyalty and Sedition, the true object of loyalty is a good legal constitution. And if you think about it, all these people in the federal government at every level, they take an oath to the Constitution, not an oath to a political party or to defeating the other guy. Their oath is to the Constitution. And the only acceptable number on this is a reduction. And TJ actually put it a little bit more hardcore. He put it this way. Let me pull this back up. This from TJ Roberts. A Second Amendment president would disband the unconstitutional ATF and refuse to enforce any federal gun laws. A Second Amendment president would brag about his total gun law prosecution numbers being 0 and nothing more. And I would even go as far as saying you could go in there and say, I'm going to support the Second Amendment, and then show numbers year after year after year of how the ATF, in your budget requests, you're asking for less employees, less budget, and less enforcement. And then you show with their annual numbers, which come out somewhere between May and July every year, that your enforcement is going down. Thomas Jefferson told Abigail Adams in response to the Alien and Sedition Acts that it was his duty to stop the enforcement of that at every time that he could under the authority as president. So basically, if we're talking about using executive orders to do this and that and this and that, where you can use an executive order is to give an enforcement priority to an executive agency. He could tell the ATF, we're going to deprioritize this, and this form issue. If you just want to say one thing, but then in the long run, what you would see is far less enforcement because so much of it is a paperwork problem. Just taking a look over at the live chat, Warsaw Patriot says, history has shown us itself gun control is just another form of government overreach, like the Soviet Union, China, Germany, and Italy. Ryan Lopez, good to see you, buddy, says, ouch. Greg says, principle over party. Yes, so many people have party over principle. We can call it tribalism. Irwin says it's only 110 pages. Is that the form length? I don't actually know. I've never done this, so I'm not aware. And if it's, I guess I should look into that. Whether it's 1 page or 1,000 pages, the longer it is, the more likely it is you're going to find error. And the fact that the ATF is so aggressively going after it, and the president is so proud to be boasting about this. On August or September 5th of last year, he specifically bragged about the fact that they instituted a bump stock ban on his directive and had a record number of firearms offenses convicted. Not good at all. Funky Euphemism says there are men of principle in both parties, but no party of principle. Yeah, I think some of them have principle. I mean, most of them, their principles are really bad. So those are probably even harder to work with. I guess the people who have no principle and only care about popular opinion might be the easiest to work with, because if you can convince them that doing the right thing is actually popular, then you can get them to do something. Greg says, you're in California. You have it worse than most of us, probably. Smedley Butler says, show me in the Constitution where any gun control is legal. That's not the right way to read the Constitution, but it certainly bans. Yeah, okay. Todd and Rue said, no, I'm on a gun. That's Political Brew. Good to see you over on Periscope and Twitter. And just taking a little bit more here. Justin Bayola says, even one is too many, but not like there's some huge conspiracy. All Americans have the right to own and bear arms. It is a natural right. That's what Phyllis says over on Facebook. Filthy Capitalist, that's an awesome screen name over on YouTube, says 4473s are an infringement. Yes, the very existence of that form, this idea, like TJ says, it asks you these questions to determine whether or not you're allowed to own a gun. But if the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, it doesn't say shall not be infringed unless the government comes up with some reasons that you have to answer in a form that they can actually deny you. So in and of itself, it's a problem. So the fact that they're actually their top 10, so many of them, of their enforcement of the record, most in history, are on these clerical errors or not filling out something properly, makes it even worse. Well, I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope it was fun to watch, at least. I like doing something a little bit less deep, especially after I've been doing things like the Whiskey Rebellion and some of the other more deeper history episodes, a lot of heady stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. That's more important than anything. If you support the show, please continue leaving some comments, whether it's live or in the archive. You can smash the like button, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, get bell notifications, iTunes, Podbean, and elsewhere. Leaving reviews helps more than you can imagine. Every time you do that on any of these platforms, do any of these free actions, it tells the algorithm of most platforms to show the program to more people. So we are reaching more and more and more. When I first started doing this, it was like a total of like 120 people. We're up to probably around 2,500 or so per episode. It's not huge. I'd like to see that get to 5,000 and 10,000, but we're on our way. And I'm so very grateful for those of you who spend time with me week in and week out, whether it's once a week, once a month, or every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Of course, if you want to kick in, get behind us financially, there's absolutely no way we could get the job done without you putting your financial faith behind our work. And we've got so many members out there who are helping us out for as little as $2 a month. We really make it easy to get on board. That's 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me again today. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time here on the Path to Liberty.